Could I just say, I just came from Beaufort, and we had a wonderful Veterans Day ceremony at that beautiful cemetery. The next time you're down in Beaufort, I strongly recommend it. It's one of the very beautiful places that I've been to in my life, and I've been to a number of cemeteries. It was started in 1863, and initially it was the Union War dead who were buried there, and you can see the tombstones of the Union War dead. And obviously Beaufort is worth visiting any time, but the cemetery there is really deeply moving, and they've just doubled the size of it so to make it even. And the trees there and the Spanish moss, I don't have to tell you, but it was a very touching ceremony. And you know, the most touching thing about it, my dear friends, to me, is that there are still some of our brave and wonderful greatest generation there, and many of them are leaving us all the time, and they remain a source of inspiration to all of us who had the honor of serving after them. And to meet them, as I met yesterday a guy who was at Guadalcanal, a Marine at Guadalcanal, a 17-year-old Marine. It's really very touching. And it's all brought home, by the way, in case you have not seen it. I'm sure many of you have this latest Ken Burns documentary on World War II. I would strongly recommend you see that documentary. He's great at baseball and the Civil War, but I think this is really his best. So it was very touching to see all of them, and of course then our newest generation of young Americans who are really, really, really serving under very difficult conditions. Our friend Lindsey Graham, who many of you know is a great senator from this state, who by the way also is the only member of Congress who was a reserve colonel in the Air Force. I forgave him for that part. He's also a lawyer. I even forgave him for that part. By the way, you know the difference between a lawyer and a catfish? One is a scum-sucking bottom dweller, and the other is a fish. Okay, I don't know why I moved to do this, but you know the only ethnic joke you can tell in politics today? Irish jokes. Why that is, I do not know, but it's the only joke you can tell. I was honored by a group a month or so ago for helping the Irish peace process in Northern Ireland. So I had to tell them the story about the bar in Boston, Massachusetts. It's empty, one guy down at either end of the bar. One guy gets up, goes down the other end of the bar and says, "Hey, where are you from?" He says, "I'm from Ireland." He says, "Really? I'm from Ireland too. Let me buy a drink." He says, "No, let me buy you a drink." "No, let me buy you one." Buying each other drinks. He said, "Where are you from in Ireland?" "I'm from Dublin." He says, "No." He says, I'm from Dublin too." "Really? Well, let me buy you a drink." "No, let me buy it." Back and forth. He says, "Where'd you go to high school?" "I went to St. Mary's." I said, "I went to St. Mary's." "Really?" Well, all this commotion going on. A guy walks into the bar, sees all the commotion down the end of the bar, says to the bartender, "What's going on down there?" The guy said, "It's just the O'Reilly twins getting drunk again." What the world that has to do with President of the United States. But since we lost the lawyer joke, I thought anyway, the lawyer vote. Anyway, these brave young people, Lindsey Graham and I were over there. And by the way, Lindsey went over there. Month of August, Congress takes the month off naturally, and but that's right after we vote ourselves a pay raise and go on vacation. Lindsey Graham put on his uniform as a colonel in the United States Air Force, goes to Baghdad, spends 3 weeks over there trying to help them what really is what democracy is all about, and that's a rule of law. That's a rule of law. You can be very proud. You can be very, very proud that Lindsey Graham is a senator from the state of South Carolina in this country. So anyway, Lindsey and I were over there in July, and the temperature is 135 degrees outside the forward operating bases. These young kids are putting on 40 pounds of body armor, another 40 pounds of equipment, and they're going out there 8, 10, 12 hours a day. These young men and women are serving the most magnificently of any military we've ever had in history, and I know you appreciate them. This war has divided America, It has divided none of us in our support for those brave young men and women, and I thank you for your support for them. They're doing a great job. And here's the news, my friends. Here's the news. They're succeeding. We are winning in Iraq. We are winning. Months ago, just let me remind you, I am the only person who's running for the nomination of either party that when I came back early on from Iraq and saw the Rumsfeld strategy was failing and we were going to fail and that it had to change, I was criticized by Republicans for not being loyal. I said, this strategy is going to fail. We've got to have a new strategy. And that strategy is the one that's succeeding today. And when it first started and when things were at a low point, John Edwards, the president, the candidate for president on the Democrat ticket, called it the McCain strategy and the McCain surge. They don't call it that anymore, by the way. But the fact is, it's succeeding. There are parts of Anbar province that are safe. You probably don't know. You may have, the media missed this one, okay? 2 weeks ago, there was a 5K race in Ramadi. In Ramadi, the town, the city in Anbar province, it used to be Fort Apache, where we used to take our highest casualties. They just had a 5K race 2 weeks ago. My friends, things are a lot safer. Are they safe yet? No. Is the Maliki government functioning as effectively as we want it to? No. The Iraqi police still are infiltrated in some cases by radical Shiites that are more interested in killing Sunni than Shia. But I promise you, you are going to see further drawdown of American troops, further turning over of provinces in Iraq to the Iraqi military and police, and you're going to have a flawed but functioning democracy. And what you're not going to have is a date for surrender, which is what the Democrats keep trying to get us to do. A date for surrender, which is what a date for withdrawal is. Look, I know it's hard and frustrating and sad. I know that. We all know that. We know how sad we are by the sacrifice that has been made. But if you don't believe me, believe the president of Iran, who a little over 2 weeks ago, remember the Iranians, the ones that are dedicated to the extinction of the state of Israel, the Iranians who are building nuclear weapons, the Iranians who today are exporting the most lethal explosive devices across the Iranian border into Iraq and killing young Americans. The president of Iran just a couple of weeks ago said, and I quote, "The United States will leave Iraq. There will be a void, and we, the Iranians, will fill the void." Now, just take his word for it, not mine. And that's what's at stake here. Harry Reid, the United States Majority Leader of the United States Senate in April, said the war was lost. Well, if we lost, who won it? If we lost, who won it? What the Democrats have lost sight of is that presidents don't lose wars, and political parties don't lose wars, but nations lose wars. And when nations lose wars, nations suffer the consequences. I'll tell you, these two guys right here, and a lot of people in this room, knew what it was like. The last time we won every battle. We won every battle, but because of the influence of the anti-war crowd, we lost the war. We never lost a battle. And you know what happened? We came home, and we had riots on aircraft carriers. We had rampant drug use in the military. We had discipline problems to the point where the commandant of the Marine Corps, then General Lew Wilson, had to get rid of so many people. Somebody asked him, he said, "How many are you going to get rid of?" And he said, "If it's only me and my driver, we're going to have a Marine Corps you can be proud of." So, we had riots, we had assassinations, we had Americans being held captive in Iran. And a guy came out of the West, and his name was Ronald Reagan. And he said, take down this wall. He said that America was a shining city on a hill, and we still are. And my friends, we'll win this conflict in Iraq if we can keep the American people's patience, because these are the best warriors.